My wife heard a skinwalker in our house last night. Let me start off by saying that my wife doesn't believe in the paranormal entities or anything of that nature. We have three cats, and one of them likes to be a rebel, jumping onto counters and meowing at the top of his lungs just looking for attention. He does this throughout the night, and it's a normal, regular occurrence. Last night, after a few beers and a video game, I decided it was time to head to bed with my wife. I woke up this morning, my wife basically attached to me, with wide eyes and a nervous look on her face. I asked her what was wrong, and she proceeded to tell me what happened last night. She said that around 2:50 in the morning, she was woken up to a noise that sounded like one of our cats downstairs meowing unusually loud. After giving herself a few seconds to perk up and fully pay attention, she said that the meows sounded more like a person trying to mimic a cat and kept saying hello. After meowing for 2 to 3 minutes, a loud bang came at our door and then a notification went off for a motion sensors at our front door. When she told me this, I checked my phone and sure enough, there was a notification for motion detected at 2:52 a.m. I asked my wife why she didn't wake me up so I could grab my gun. She said she was frozen with fear and didn't want it to hear her make a noise. We're out running errands while I'm typing this, but something made me uncomfortable about her story. Last night, I set the home security alarm around 9 p.m., and we didn't turn it off until we walked the dog this morning. To make things worse, we had slept with all our animals in the same room. So whatever was in our house or outside the front door was not one of our animals. Obviously, at first, the first thing that comes to my mind, Skinwalker. But maybe I'm just being paranoid. I checked all the rooms in the house after I got up. I'm not sure what I could have done anyways. It's very odd that my wife was scared so badly by something she doesn't necessarily believe in. We bought this house brand new, so no one has lived here before. When I'm home alone, I do feel like I'm being watched or someone's always walking directly behind me. My wife also said that the house is giving her chills since we moved in. Something is just off about it. We just got home and I went to hang up one of my shirts in the master bedroom closet when I noticed that the board that covers the attic access had been shifted a little. When I asked my wife about it, she said that she's never been up there and the builders would have placed it back in its original place. Before we made the purchase, I'm genuinely getting anxious just thinking about what could be going on. Has anyone had an experience like this or similar at least? We're going to my mother's in-laws to get some sage. My wife said burning it should keep whatever's around the house away. That is not a dog. I am Amanda Willis. I live in a small town in the northern part of Michigan in a small cabin in the woods. Living in the woods in a secluded area is tough and often leave people feeling lonely. As a result, I decided to go to my local shelter and adopt a dog. I figured I live in a secluded area with lots of land and forest for the dog to run around. I also work, mostly from my home, giving me free time needed to take care of a dog. At the local shelter, I noticed nothing odd. It was the normal barks and whimpers of dogs. wagging their tails excitedly to leave their kennels. I'll be honest, I always hated going to animal shelters. Seeing all the animals, some cowering and some begging to be let out, always filled my heart with sorrow. I was sick of loneliness though, and to be completely honest, I am not the biggest people person. So a dog it was. I had always wanted a dog as a kid and loved every dog I was allowed to pet. My parents could never afford one, and I never got around to getting one as an adult. I was most interested in getting a larger dog, one who would enjoy running around my land and perhaps even go on long walks with me. Most of the dogs just didn't appeal to me until I came across a large, scrawny, black and white mutt. I'm not the greatest with dog breeds, but I had guessed possibly border collie, greyhound, and perhaps a little bit of pit bull. The shelter labeled the dog as a border collie mix. The dog had a longer snout, blockier head, long thin legs, and a leaner build. He had half prick ears, one slightly floppier than the other. His eyes were an icy shade of blue, but one had brown mixed in. He was stunning. I kneeled beside the cage, and he wagged his tail and hesitantly got up and approached. His movements were off. It was like of a creature not quite used to walking on four legs, like a human trying to walk on four legs. Who's this guy? I asked the worker who had accompanied me into the kennel room. Oh, him, she said nervously. He's a dog we recently took in, found by a stranger on the side of the street. No sign of a microchip and no one has taken him in. But the lady trailed off, clearly uncertain whether to say something. What about him? I asked. He acts a little weird. He doesn't play with the dogs or other dogs. Heck, the other dog seems to be afraid of him. Whenever he approaches, even the friendliest dogs we have at the shelter, he sends them away, running, barking, and snarling, hackle raised and trembling. He's been returned 5 times in a month we have him here, all without notice. The owners always return looking nervous and never give us a clear answer. The shelter worker stuttered out her reply. At the moment, I felt bad for the poor boy. It wasn't his fault, but I guess I should have heeded the warnings. I adopted him and took him home that day, and the things got weirder each day. On the way home, I took him to a local pet store, a small family owned business, on a leash. Every dog that came across him lunged and barked, cowering behind their owners. Every dog, no matter the breed or size, even a guide dog I had frequently met when I went into the town, had lost it. That dog was the most stable ever, never barking or showing a speck of fear or aggression to anyone. It was odd, but I just figured it was nothing. Perhaps normal. I had never owned a dog before, so I didn't question. I had jokingly at the time named him Cujo, after the rabid Saint Bernard in Cujo. Now I'm afraid that it isn't a joke anymore. Everything went silent when we entered the woods together. Birds flew away, crickets stopped chirping, not a single snap of twig in the distance, just complete dead silence. His eyes appeared to glow in the dark, a piercing blue through the dark of night. The experience that confirmed my theory was after a month of owning Kuju. The name had stuck. I awoke at a night to a strange silence that had fallen across the house. I got up, my throat dry to get a drink of water. The house was dead silent. Not even the house settling was heard. My heart hammered in my chest as I headed for the kitchen. A crunch, snap, crack was heard from the direction of the kitchen. Kuju? I called out. Hesitantly, the noises stopped. I entered the kitchen to see Kuju standing on his back legs, his arms positioned weirdly. And the worst part about it, his head was turned around so he was staring at him. His back facing me, but his head was shriveled around. His mouth was partially open, drool dripping from his mouth. I let out a scream and sprinted to my room. The next morning, when I crept out, Kuju came to me with a wagging tail, holding something in his mouth. He dropped it at my feet, and I heard the gag as the body of a dismembered squirrel landed at my feet, its intestines leaking from his body. I found many more of this that day, of many different animals, even a deer. He had somehow brought into the house. The smell of blood and decay was evident even after I scrubbed the house from head to toe. At that point, I didn't know what to do. I was terrified of him, but I didn't want to return him. What would I even tell them? Plus, he wasn't a bad companion outside of those incidents. The worst experience of all when I awoke facing the ceiling. I didn't open my eyes right away, but I felt something dripping onto my face. I ground and wiped the liquid away. I opened my eyes and let out a scream. Kuju was on the ceiling, his jaw stretched out so wide it looked to be dislocated. He was perched on the ceiling, his body twisted in a way that shouldn't be possible. His eyes were glowing, not faint glow, but a full-blown glow that illuminated the whole room. A light blue glow. His teeth were sharper and his nails are snarled claws digging into the ceiling. Bits of plaster fell onto my face. I froze and couldn't move. I was so terrified I was frozen out of fear. The creature above came to change, its face fading from once of a dog into one that is almost human. Its flesh and fur fell away, turning into the skin, hair sprouting from his head. The creature The creature looked like me, except it was wrong. Some things weren't right. Its eyes were slightly too close, nails a little too sharp, and nose the wrong shape. To the blind eye, it was me though. It took one of its bony arms and hit me as hard as he could. I awoke with chains connecting me to the wall. No matter how hard I tugged or shifted them, I couldn't figure out a way to unlock them. It was like the creature welded them to my legs. I could hardly even move. I tightened this out on the last of my battery. No one is picking up my calls and I'm afraid of what is to come. I came with a warning. There is someone out there pretending to be me. If you meet someone with long brown hair with green eyes that seems a little too close, claiming to be Amanda Willis, that is not me. I am locked in a basement, chains welded to my legs. I fear I may die down here, and that the thing is going to take my place. I'm afraid it has already hurt people. If you adopt a dog from a local shelter and he displays any unusual behavior or perhaps wrong in any way, return the dog and get rid of it as soon as you can. That is not a dog. I was in prison for 15 years. There was a skinwalker in there with us. A little background first. I was serving a 15-year sentence in a penitentiary in southern Arizona. What I was in there for isn't important. During my stay there were countless things that happened that no one could explain, and even more, no one wanted to know more about. It all started with a prison legend. Supposedly, years ago, something awful and unexplainable happened in the prison. Every morning, we'd be woken up and expected to stand near the front of our cells while guards visually confirmed and we were present and accounted for. Apparently, about a year before I got sent there, the most brutal and unexplainable thing happened during one of these routines. A man who had a cell to himself looked very off during this check. When a guard pulled over another guard to help him check it out, they found it wasn't actually the prisoner they were expecting at all. It was a totally different man. This man was wearing the skin of the other man over him, loosely fitting, draped over him, apparently looking like a real monster. The scariest thing where, though, was the guy wearing the skin was not an inmate. They had no idea how he even got into the prison, let alone a cell. What's worse is that they couldn't even figure out who the hell he was. He wasn't documented anywhere. And what's worse than that? They never even found the body of the man of the skin he was wearing. Pretty grisly stuff, I know. And I realized that not the go-to definition of a skinwalker, but that's what the prison called him. The Skinwalker. Didn't help that the guy never talked apparently. Anyway, that was the started the whole skinwalker superstition around the yard. Apparently, the guy got shipped to a different spot about a month after it happened, and just about every in the Gen Pop felt all better for it. I heard about the stories on the second day of my stay. Hell of a story to hear to a place in your home for the foreseeable future. Now, on to the real shit though. Sure, that guy was a skinwalker, but all he did in the long run was to get an old lifer Navajo inmate to tell everyone about actual skinwalkers. It seemed like a lot of prison culture actually revolved around them. Now, apparently, skinwalkers are tricky to point out on the spot, but if you manage to survive around one for more than a minute or two, almost everyone can tell the mannerism are all off. They can mimic human speech but not replicate it. They twitch maniacally. They have an unnatural gait while walking, but apparently they could get better with experience. The old Navajo guy, his name was Carl, said that he was sure there was an actual one among the prisoners, slowly picking us off over the years. He called it the Grand Master Skinwalker at one point. Apparently, he thought that it had human mannerism down so well that you might not be able to tell if it was your cellmate for a day or two. It had to be good, he posited one night. He would expect a skinwalker to jump at any opportunity for a kill, but this one realized that it had a revolving door of people to kill coming to it, and masterfully bided its time as Carl taught for years. A lot of guys found humor in it. A lot more were really on edge about it. Every once in a while in prison, people snap. Sometimes you'll find your cellmate swinging in front of your bunk, strung up around the neck by his pant leg. Sometimes you just can't take it anymore. But in our yard, people tended to snap in every very special way. It wouldn't be an outburst at dinner or a silent suicide at night. Guys would just stop talking, hunch over and shuffle around. Any friendship they had would be mostly out the window. They would turn into a loner during rec time. They would let their hair hang in front of their faces. No one liked to talk about it. Like if they did, it would happen next to them. I felt the same way. I didn't know if it was a skinwalker or just people going crazy, but I didn't want to find out. It wasn't clockwork or anything, but every time someone snapped in this way, it wasn't more than a couple weeks before they were shipped off or transferred to God knows where without anyone else knowing beforehand. Then there was the nighttime occurrence. Short, loud bursts of sound echo through my cell block during all hours of the night on a regular basis. It sounded like a mix between a pig's dying squeals and nails on chalkboard. Just another thing no one liked to talk about. Even scarier were the shadows and footsteps. The block was dimly illuminated in the night by few lights hanging from the ceiling outside the cells. I myself saw shadows flight across my wall on regular occasion. When there were definitely no guards near my cell. One time, near the end of my sentence, I woke up, looked at my back wall, and found a perfect silhouette of a person standing there. But when I looked, my bunkmate was asleep and no one was outside my cell. And the footsteps. Everyone hated the footsteps. They were the scariest parts. In the night, sometimes, more rarely than the shadows, you would hear ungodly, fast footsteps. They sounded like wet feet slapping on the tile floor. Whatever caused them would fly from one end of the block to the other in dead sprint. Whatever it was inhumanely fast. If you happened to be awake before it started, by the time you heard the footstep on one side of your cell and whipped your head around to see the thing run by, it sounded like 3 cells past you. Everyone hated the footsteps. I agreed. I thought they were the worst. I was released from that place a month ago, and I have more stories than I can count. I swear it was nearly my turn. About a week before I was discharged, my cellmate, a good friend of mine, snapped in the same kind of way. I didn't sleep for the entire week. Well, I did sleep, of course, but never for a few minutes at a time. Never turned my back on the guy. The scariest thing, I woke up one night to him somehow snaking his body through the bars of our cell. For reference, I couldn't get anything past my shoulder through them. The worst part though, he was coming back into our cell. On the day of my release, I didn't say a word to him, just left. He seemed fine with it, so I was. I had made it through 15 years of prison fights, gang disputes, and for all I know, skinwalker abductions. I left through the front gates, a free man. As I walked along the fence of the rec yard, I spotted my cellmate standing off on his own, like he had for the last week or so. I shook my head, not even really sure if it was him anymore. I took one last look over the yard, this time from the other side of the fence. I wish I hadn't. There, standing off on his own, on the other side of the yard was Carl, slouched over, eyeing the other inmates and twitching maniacally. This testimony was written by a deleted account on Reddit. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, hit that like button, and turn on the notification bell. And once again, thank you for binging.